This content is brought to you by Link2, which makes private equity investment very easy. Link2 is democratizing the process of being able to invest into tech companies and crypto companies. Previously, this opportunity was only available to venture capitalists, hedge funds, and investment firms. Well, now, if you are an accredited investor, you can get this opportunity before you to be able to invest into crypto companies like Ripple, BitPay, Dapper Labs, Uphold, Abra, and many more. Link2 continues to add these respective companies and their portfolio is growing. So this is a great opportunity to double dip, to be able to hold the crypto tokens such as Ethereum, Algorand, XRP, or whatever it may be, and also invest into the companies that are building the infrastructure of the crypto market. And Link2 was part of the group that invested into Coinbase pre-IPO. And of course, that did really well for them. Well, you have the opportunity to catch the next Coinbase with Link2. So definitely check them out. It's once again the opportunity to double dip, just like the VCs, just like the hedge funds. Check out Link2, link in the description. Welcome back to the Thinking Crypto podcast, your home for cryptocurrency news and interviews. With me today is Wietse Wind, who's the founder of the XRPL Labs. Wietse, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you for allowing me to be here.
Well, Wietse, as we were talking about before the recording, I wanted to speak to you for a very long time because you're on the building side. You guys have been developing some very cool things on the XRP ledger. And I'm really excited to be speaking with you today to get this opportunity. With that said, I would love to get to know you a bit better and learn about your background, where you're from and where'd you grow up?
I am from the Netherlands. I grew up in Amersfoort, in the geographical center of the Netherlands. It's a small country, so it doesn't even really matter where in the Netherlands you are. And I'm actually still in Amersfoort, and just normal neighborhood townhouse, but a very, very nice park nearby, which is actually why I'm here with my family. And in that park is a really nice old historic building, green all around, and that's where we have the XRPL Labs office.
And I've seen a video of that. It looks like you said, like a house. And I was, it's amazing to think of that as an office, but it's a very cool office, right? I mean, you have like I'm assuming some cool amenities. You have a different vibe versus a corporate environment.
Definitely. Yeah, it's an old, it's from the 1400s, 1500s, 1600s, a couple of renovations there. And there are around 8 businesses in that one office, all sharing the building, and it's a wonderful environment. If you walk over to the office, we are all at the walking or cycling distance from the office, or the ones here in Amersfoort anyway. And just the sound of birds, blue sky, sun. That's a great way to start and end your day.
That's awesome. What did you do before you founded the XRPL Labs? What was your background? Was it like development? And maybe you can walk us through how you got into that.
Yeah, so I have been interested in tech and hardware and code for as long as I can remember. I was doing my first soldering when I was 7 or 8. At some point I started to code a little bit basic and all kinds of stuff on old computers. I turned multiple dead computers into one working, functioning computer and then played with that. Thanks to a teacher back in the days when I was 10 or something. He provided all those computers at school. And I always liked the combination of hardware and software, but at the end of the day, if I had to choose software. So I started to do some programming gigs for my first clients when I was 14, still in school, doing some programming, and some more. And at some point, I enrolled at university in Amsterdam, and within a month, I realized that I was never going to finish those 4 or 5 years at the university. So I decided to quit, focus on my own business, doing software integrations and I mean, if that didn't work out, I could always go back to university a year later, and I actually didn't. And the interesting thing is that one of the first 2 employees I hired when I was 19 is still with us at XRPL Labs, Tristan, the designer, our designer, and he never left. So we only need, well, not even half a word. He knows what I like, what I want. I know what he can design, and that's a great way. He actually designed the application everyone's using today.
Wow. So you were an entrepreneur at a very young age, at 19. That's pretty amazing. What is your favorite coding language? And I don't know if you have one, but I'm curious.
So I don't think I have a favorite. They all have their quirks and advantages and efficiencies and inefficiencies. I also don't like, you have tribalism in crypto, you have tribalism in coding and programming languages. I think it depends on what you want to code. There are different languages more suited for one thing or the other. And there are always multiple languages you can achieve the same goals in. So I code a lot in JavaScript and TypeScript because there's a lot of resources, libraries for the XRPL in those languages. I also like it that you can do both front-end and back-end stuff with the same language. It's quite efficient that way. You can reuse components and libraries in the front-end and back-end. But I mean, we're using whatever we need to achieve a goal. If you look at the application, we are building that in React Native, which is, of course, again, JavaScript, TypeScript, but there are also native components. We're moving more and more things to the native side. And by we, I mostly mean Ali, our rockstar developer working on the app. And yeah, so my first real programming gigs were in PHP, like many of my generation. I lost touch with PHP and everything happening in PHP, but on the other hand, people are still using it, and we offer our SDK today in PHP as well. So whatever people want to use, need to use.
That's awesome. I don't know if you know, but and I've interviewed him, Brendan Eich, who's the founder or creator of JavaScript. He's, of course, the founder of Brave, the Brave browser, and the basic attention token. So he's in crypto now. I don't know if you knew about that, but it's just,
I know.
Yeah. How did you first come across crypto, or what was your first encounter? Was it with XRP? Was it with Bitcoin? And what was your aha moment?
It was, of course, Bitcoin. Like most people, I guess. It was in 2010 or 11, I think 11 maybe. And I just checked it out. It was interesting. It was new. It was intriguing. So I installed some wallet, non-custodial wallet on my iMac in the living room, one of those first Intel iMacs. And mining was easy back then. You just fired it up and you let your computer spin for a couple of nights and you had a couple of Bitcoins. It was crazy, but it wasn't really worth anything. And at some point I spent most of the Bitcoins on newsgroup access. And then the very few Bitcoins left, I sold at $200 or something.
Oh, wow.
And I never really looked back. That was it. Went on with my life, had a business to grow. And until 2016, I watched a video on YouTube, presentation by David Schwartz, CTO at Ripple now, and he was talking at, I believe, a C++ conference about his view on blockchain consensus and what the XRPL is, and that sparked something intriguing again. And what I didn't found in Bitcoin back in the days, where I saw actual use cases for, I mean, it's very interesting. It's new. It allows you to transfer value without a middleman. Super interesting. But with the block time, and not back then, but these days, the fees and everything, it's not really suited for retail adoption, for everyday use, to make everyday life more efficient when it comes to payments, micropayments, stuff like that. And based on what David Schwartz presented there, I realized that this technology could maybe be that. It could maybe allow that. So I put it on this list, things to look at whenever I have time, which you never do if you have your own business or not. But at least I never had time. And then 4 years ago, so that's 2018. My wife and I were expecting our first child, and I realized that the pace at which I was going and the long days, the late evenings and everything that came with running a business, that I couldn't combine it with the family I wanted to have, the father I wanted to be. So I decided to stop doing what I was doing. Very hard decision, but no, the employees understood the decision, and most of the customers I had back then understood it. And I had a lot of time suddenly, and I didn't have any plans for when I would go back to work. But I did have time, and I did have that list. And quite high on the list was to look in to the XRP ledger. And within 7 minutes after doing that, I was connected to a WebSocket in my browser console, straight connected to the XRPL. Could query transactions, could sign my transaction locally. Half an hour later, broadcast it to the network, and 4 seconds later, there was transaction finality while consuming less than 1/100th of a cent. Mm-hmm. And that's when I realized that the combination of the speed, low fees, the fact that it was consensus based, and that it used everyday protocols like WebSockets that's available on any client, any programming languages, any browser, that's a game changer. So I decided to build some more. Built the XRP Tip Bot, a text-based tip bot that was active on Reddit and later on Twitter and some other networks. And not a lot of time later, people sent 2 million USD equivalent through that tip bot, and I realized that was something I wanted to continue doing, but not, of course, with a tip bot, but something that could find its way to retail use cases one day.
That's awesome. I've used the XRP Tip Bot a lot. I've gotten a lot of tips. Thank you to all the people who've tipped me. Really cool feature, and I've used it primarily on Twitter. By the way, not to go off topic a bit, but any updates on the XRP Tip Bot? I know there has been some issues with Twitter and all that, but any updates on that?
So the Tip Bot I originally created isn't really active anymore. Two things changed. One, most active network was Twitter. There's just no running it on Twitter anymore. They ban it within minutes after I started it again. And there's the regulatory landscape. There's just no, I mean, it's custodial, right? So sure. It's in this Tip Bot hot wallet for people to claim and to deposit into and then transfer to someone else, which is basically just an internal Tip Bot database transaction until people move funds in or get funds out over the XRPL. And crypto custody is a licensed activity in the Netherlands and many countries these days. So it doesn't really make sense to spend 100K a year on compliance costs for a tip bot that you want to offer to people for free to send micropayments to a random stranger on the internet. So that doesn't work anymore. It had a good time. It had a good run. But we built Xumm now, and we allow developers and end users to interact using our platform and application in a non-custodial way. And one of the community members, Flying Fox on Twitter, he built a complete integration with our platform and Twitter and other networks to allow non-custodial tipping, which is actually much more interesting even, if you ask me. It's a little less convenient because you actually have to set it up. I think one of the advantages of the original tip bot was that someone didn't needed an activated account to send tips. They were just there waiting to be claimed. But a non-custodial tip bot on social media is still quite interesting.
Yeah,
and being used.
for sure. And I mean, it was just so easy to use it and tip someone. It was pretty great. And as a recipient of tips, I mean, it was amazing. I remember a lot of folks were using it. So it makes me wonder, you know, it's Twitter ban back in the day, that was Twitter banning it because they were prepping for their own tipping feature, which they have launched now.
Yeah, who knows, right? That's all just speculation. We'll never really know. I think many of the bans were actually because of tribalism, where other crypto communities reported the XRP Tip Bot. So first thing I noticed was that when I shut down the public tweet notifications or the tip notifications, where the tip bot would reply and say, hey, I processed the tip at whoever tip is waiting for you. As soon as I shut that down and moved to DMs, it was banned a lot less because there was no public tweet for people to actively ban. But then, of course, the community tipped people from other crypto communities just to screw them. Just to, you big Bitcoin maximalist, here's 5 XRP. And then they got a DM to notify them, which they, of course, reported. So then I shut down that as well. And we launched the Tipbot app so people could get a push notification, which was quite, I mean, you had to set it up, right? But otherwise it was still there. The tip was still there waiting for you. And that helped a lot. But still, every 1, 2, 3 months, the account would be banned or shadow banned or fully banned. At some point, my personal account as well, which I actively use to engage with the community, with the ecosystem. So yeah, at some point it became quite hard to operate. So in a final attempt to keep it alive, I switched to hashtags, which is, you can just scrape that publicly. No way of banning that. But shortly after, the Netherlands implemented their crypto regulation. So that was the end of custody.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, and certainly doesn't make sense to pay, like you said, the hundreds of thousands of dollars for the regulations to custody the XRP in a hot.
No, and you'll have to do KYC and everything. So who's gonna send tips if you have to KYC first? It's never gonna work.
Interesting. I'm curious, what do you hold in your crypto portfolio? You mentioned you had some Bitcoin. I'm assuming you have some XRP. Do you have anything else?
I have some XRP, but by far not as much as people would expect, I guess. I mean, yes, I hold some XRP, but that's it. All the other assets I held, I sold at some point. And well, I will not part with that last XRP, but I'm not in the space for the speculation at all.
For sure, I know you're very much on the building side, looking to see what new technologies you can build. So let's talk a bit about the XRPL Labs. How did the idea come about? And I know you touched a bit on it, of building this, and what's the mission?
Yeah, so what we're building is what people see, what they have in their hands, is a wallet app, like many others. A couple of differences from most wallets is that we are focusing on one chain only, which is the XRP ledger, of course, and that we're feature complete. There are no other software wallets who are feature complete. And I say software wallet, we actually have a hardware component as well, where we integrate seamlessly with NFC cards, Tangent cards. But we're not just a wallet. The original vision, and I think we realized that today, but now we can build on top of that, is that most payments in real life, which is what we're going after, to basically turn the XRPL into a new, more efficient payment rails, allowing for cross-border payments, peer-to-peer, but also payments that aren't viable today, micropayments, everything below $5, $10. To transfer anything of value, basically efficiently on the XRPL. And we're building a wallet to do that, but it's much more, because we realized that almost all payments happening today are pool payments. You're in a store, the store wants something from you. You're on an e-commerce website, the e-commerce website wants something from you. I mean, you primarily try to purchase something, but then the store wants a payment. If you want to read a news article behind a paywall, we can discuss about the paywalls shouldn't be there, but let's say they're there and they need, like, those businesses need to eat and pay their employees as well. So they come up with a subscription, $10, $20 a month, and people won't get it. They will find their news elsewhere. But people might be interested in paying for just the single article. But there's no efficient and cheap way to do that. And even if it's cheap for the consumer, it's still not cheap for the retailer, where the payment costs are actually higher than the single article. So they don't offer that. And things like that can be solved with crypto, with a more efficient payment rails. But all of that is a pool payment. Someone wants you to pay something. So you can't just have a non-custodial crypto wallet. You need something for developers, retailers, for everybody to interact with the end user. A platform, basically, for the end user and a developer, retailer, and to meet up, to find that connection, and then still to be able to perform this non-custodial exchange of value. And looking at the future, where non-custodial wallets are probably going to be regulated as well, we can also be that with that platform that we already have in place for people to meet up and pay each other. We can also provide a opt-in compliance layer to be able to do that in a regulated environment in the future. So yeah, we're building a wallet, but much more, an entire platform behind it. And that's actually getting a lot of use today, where people are building what we call X apps, so web apps inside Xumm, and integrations with Xumm to sign in crypto as an identity, or XRPL account as an identity, but then also to do pool payments or pool sign requests, because the XRPL can do much more than payments. It has a native decentralized exchange. You can trade on the XRPL. There's multi-signing. There are all kinds of nice things on the XRPL, and we allow developers to build stuff without having to worry about key custody or key management or security. That's our job. We do that really well. I think we do that. I dare to say we do that a lot better than many in the ecosystem. And well, use our platform and interact with the end users.
For sure. And this Xumm wallet that you guys have built, is there any plans to have that integrated or connected in any way to Coil, which Stefan Thomas, I've interviewed him, who's creator of Coil, and the web monetization you were referencing with micropayments. Any plans to work together, or you guys are completely separate?
We are talking every now and then, and I think whenever a day or we see an opportunity to work together, we'll definitely take that opportunity. It makes perfect sense to add something web monetization related, ILP related to Xumm. I would say that it's mostly a matter of compliance, and not the technology can do it today.
Sure. So it's almost like who's going to be first to the game here to solve this web monetization problem? Like you're saying, the solution is there with Coil and the interledger protocol, and it's just a matter of maybe compliance regulations and things like that. Are you guys kind of monitoring what competitors are doing, and going knocking on the door of the Wall Street Journal and saying, hey, and the New York Times, stop with the paywall, integrate this technology, have people pay per article and things like that?
Yeah, we will at some point. We are already doing that with smaller players. It's easier to have a proof of concept with a couple of smaller players, where it's easier to have that conversation and to integrate, and then work our way to the bigger players with a track record. And I don't think it's about who's going to be first. There is plenty of room for a lot of players, and there are many years ahead where we can find what works and what doesn't. And it's I don't think, especially not the first years, it's one player, one winner takes it all kind of thing. Look at today, the entire crypto space. Everybody is building the same thing, or slightly different, or completely different. And there's plenty of space for that. I think we're in the creative phase, in the phase where we try a lot of things, learn a lot of things, and then combine what we've learned in what eventually will be where this entire thing is going. We haven't found it. No one has really found that yet.
Sure. Now, speaking of everyone kind of building this, and working towards these different solutions, there was a recent announcement of Hooks, the smart contract amendment to the XRP ledger. Tell us about this and the benefits and use cases.
Yeah, so hooks, we call them indeed, and they are smart contracts for the XRPL. And there are several ways to look at smart contracts and the XRPL. People are working on an EVM bridge, and there are other things being worked on. Evernote, there's the old Codius project, but all of those things are not native to the XRPL. They're layer 2 solutions, or there are side chains, which is basically layer 2, right? Something doesn't happen natively on the XRPL. It's routed somewhere, and then something picks it up and does something elsewhere. And then, so I believe that a chain like the XRPL needs layer 1 smart contracts to do certain things that are not natively possible today. And very, very useful for enterprise and retail use cases and all kinds of things. Also, the XRPL has a great model where everything is implemented natively. So, for example, the decentralized exchange,
right?
That's not a smart contract, that's native. So it's well documented, it's consistent, it's very fast, it's very cheap. Escrow, native. Again, fast, cheap, consistent, documented. NFTs, the amendment now on testnet and probably on livenet at some point. Native, again, well documented, consistent, cheap, everything. That's a great model, and it's how it should be, I believe, on an enterprise ledger. But it's also limiting when it comes to creativity. The XRPL is never the first. Well, it was back in the days, right, with the DEX and everything, but it hasn't been since. It's never the first. Things get built elsewhere using smart contracts, which is basically a big box of Legos where you can build your own stuff and be creative. And then at some point, if it takes off, we're trying to implement it on the XRPL natively. Great model, but also limiting. If you want to be ahead of the game, if you want this creativity on your technology, you need it on layer 1. And enterprises as well. If you look at enterprise use cases on blockchain technology, not even payment related, maybe a combination of payment and logistics and supply chain stuff, you cannot do that on the XRPL. Even if you think you will have, you don't need anything else than the XRPL, it might not be the best choice from an enterprise perspective, because maybe at some point you get stuck and you cannot solve it. Unless if you have some kind of computation, custom objects, data on chain. So that's what hooks are. That's basically the native XRPL version of what EVM is on Ethereum and other chains.
So
and,
I was going to quickly ask. So essentially, will we be able to do the same things that you can do on the Ethereum blockchain with this amendment?
Yes, you can. but in some on some occasions you don't have to, right? Because it's native on the XRPL. But if you look at things you need native smart contracts for on chain, is if, for example, data has to persist on chain, which should be expensive because it's expensive for the network, but still it should be possible. And to execute logic before it even gets applied to the chain. Maybe I want to reject a transaction if it doesn't meet certain criteria. Maybe if a transaction hits the chain, I want to natively spin off, spawn another transaction to make something happen. And you don't want those kind of, you can't even do some of those things on a sidechain. You need, if you want to block a transaction, you want to do it before the transaction enters your account. Your logic says no, and it doesn't enter your account. Opposed to a layer 2 solution or a sidechain where it hits your account anyway. Now you might have tainted funds in your account, and then you're going to execute some logic to flag it and do what? Send it back. It's still entered your account.
Gotcha. And as far as the timeline for this, what are the next steps with the voting aspect? I'm assuming that has to take place, and then moving to testnet and things like that.
Yeah. So we're not at the voting stage right now. We launched a separate testnet. We called it the Hooks testnet, and it has a couple of things none of the other testnets in the XRPL space has. We have enabled all amendments and hooks, aren't active elsewhere. But this is, I mean, there will be bugs. There are a couple of things we still want to fix or improve, but this is as close to as it gets to an alpha release. It's fully documented, it's public, etc., and it actually works. And this allows other devs to build on it. And we work with a couple of people from Equilibrium, a well-known blockchain development company, and they have built an entire builder. So you can now go in your browser, go to hooks.xrpl.org and start building immediately, compile it to WebAssembly, deploy it to our testnet, and actually fire transactions against it. So at some point, we will run out of things that don't work and turn this into we'll get a code audit, a couple of code audits. We'll turn it into an amendment, and then it will be voting time.
That's exciting.
Of course, there's performance testing and everything before that, but it far exceeds our initial expectations. It's very, very efficient.
Yeah, that's exciting to hear. So I know a lot of folks are anxiously awaiting this to go live and having that smart contract functionality in XRP Ledger. So with that said, there have been questions about, can the XRP Ledger support this? Would there be any network congestion or anything along those lines? Any concerns on that front, or you think there shouldn't be any?
Not at all, actually. That's so we had a couple of things we didn't want to sacrifice or compromise. So we did a lot of testing before we ended up with how we implemented this today. And we, it's then mostly Richard, another very, very smart guy at our company. So the XRPL should not take more time to close blocks, to close ledgers, to reach the next block. It should not get more expensive for non-smart contract enabled transactions. And if a transaction was smart contract enabled, it should be somewhat more expensive to cover the extra computation that would happen. It should not be really expensive, also not really expensive if you had higher transactions per second on the amount of transactions on the XRPL. And we definitely succeeded. I think that any of the current validators on the XRPL taking part in the consensus rounds will have problems sustaining a significant amount of transactions per second with hooks enabled.
Now, there has been historically, a smart contract not platform, but project that was named Codius. And it's been around for years, and I think people have been talking about it, and they're curious about where that is, and that might be more on the Ripple side. Is this a conflict with Codius? Is there no need for Codius as a result of this Hooks amendment?
They're different things, and I think they're complementary. So Codius was basically a hosting platform. You could spin up a container somewhere around the world and send streaming payments to it to keep it alive. Now, these containers, they're basically Docker containers or VMs, and they run whatever you configure them to run. And the idea was that way, or still is, I don't know. I haven't seen much activity in the project, but the idea is that it can contain smart contract code and implement your own consensus or multi-signing, because you can build whatever. You can just deploy your code and pay streamingly to keep it alive somewhere on a machine, which is something completely different from native smart contracts on the chain. So if you look at hooks, because there needs to be consensus, whatever you execute needs to be deterministic. So a hook can never call the outside world. It can only work with the state that's present on the ledger. That's all it knows. It can't reach out because, for example, if one hook on one validator would call an API and come up with a certain result, and another validator across the world would call that same API, get a different result, because I don't know, the temperature changed or whatever it's working with, you won't reach consensus. So it can only work with what exists on the ledger, opposed to what, for example, Codius could do. You could call APIs, whatever. You can run your own binaries, but then you're responsible for whatever the outcome is as well. And you'll have to make it reach out to the XRPL again or ILP or whatever. So it's a completely different thing.
Interesting. I know you guys are operating independently. How does David Schwartz and the folks at Ripple feel about this amendment? Do they ever say, "Hey, what do you think about this," or offer ideas or push back? I'm curious about that working relationship.
So they're supportive, but also kind of hesitant, which makes a lot of sense because it's quite controversial to add smart contracts to the XRPL because it never had them, and for good reasons. I think that these reasons are valid up until a couple of years back. Because right now we have the technology to actually do this in a sandboxed, efficient way. So I think that with, for example, WebAssembly and WebAssembly runtimes, and the focus on efficient sandboxed code execution on, for example, edge computing. So, for example, Cloudflare, big player in the on the internet, basically.
Yeah.
They allow developers now to run their own code on their edges, on their CDNs, content delivery networks, basically. So they do this, and they do this efficiently and very fast, and they have to by using WebAssembly. And we use that same technology, but then on Ledger. So that has proven itself, and a lot of smart, clever minds are contributing to those code bases. So we can do things right now that we couldn't do a couple of years back.
Sure. And this is, a huge item. And I'm curious, what else you guys may have on the roadmap for 2022? I know we're past the middle of the year. Are there any things you can give us a hint on that, in addition to the smart contract functionality, are there any other items you're working on?
So we're working on a lot simultaneously. So we will probably this year we will see the first small retail partnerships where we actually take our platform and some to something payments in real life. small, but that's fine. Got to start somewhere. Got to prove yourself and then expand. We are definitely this year gonna launch on and off ramp in the Netherlands and then other European countries. We're hoping to have European coverage somewhere next year and then take it from there, looking at some Asian countries as well, where we do not partner with one of the usual suspects charging horrendous fees, 5 to 10% for credit card purchases, and usually they don't offer off-ramp. So we're going to do this the hard way, or we actually do this the hard way. We're getting our own registrations and licenses because we feel we can do a much better job than most players in the industry, and because we want to make it even easier for end users, which means we won't send the users to yet another platform to share their ID and everything. We already have a full opt-in KYC integration in our own product because people can verify their on-ledger account and provide trust to other players in the ecosystem without us exposing their personal details, of course. But if we have that integration and we use your on-ledger account for identity and trust and to allow you to sign in at places, we can use that same information to make onboarding a lot easier in a regulated environment on and off ramp. And then maybe one day, if more regulations hit crypto, which I mean, we can all try to pretend that doesn't happen or say we're non-custodial, so no, we won't be fine. Everything at some point will have to deal with some kind of regulations. Yeah. If that happens, we're ready, and I think we can be one of the first players to provide, for example, if required, right, provide travel rule compliance in a non-custodial environment. So yeah, we're gonna see some interesting things there.
There's something you mentioned there that made me think of Facebook Connect and how you can go to different websites and allow you to sign in Gmail or
that
Facebook.
Works today. We actually already built that. It's working. It's already implemented here and there, where they call it Web3. Web3 is anything really. It's a catch-all. It's a wild card, but one of the things Web3 is to sign in with your blockchain account, basically, usually MetaMask or Wallet Connect or whatever. We have that for the XRPL with Xumm, and we have our own SDK and everything, so you can build it yourself in any way you prefer. But we also have a full OAuth 2 bridge, so that is drop-in compatible with all the existing Connect solutions. Sign in with Twitter, sign in with Facebook, sign in with Google, anything. You can. We actually use it ourselves to sign in at some of our own systems, using the platforms of traditional vendors, just because we integrated our own sign-in integration.
Wow, very cool. I'm excited to see all these things rolling out this year. And we'll have to have you back on to talk about them as they get released. I want to segue a bit to talk about crypto regulations. You brought it up, but regulations are coming across the world. It seems all these different governments are going to be working together. There's different travel rules and so forth. I know you're not in the United States, but the United States is certainly one of the largest capital markets. A lot of eyes on what is the SEC going to do? What is Congress going to do? What are your thoughts on the United States still hasn't fully figured this out yet? It seems they're moving in the right direction, but there's still a lack of clarity.
Yeah, but people look at the US. I mean, the things happening in the US right now, I'm not really jealous of what's happening there. Again, it will sort itself out at some point. I assume it's impossible not to. But then, if you would want to get some clarity, for example, here in the Netherlands, Europe, it's also really hard because no one really wants to give you a green light. It's still quite vague. I think over time, not that far from now, 1-2 years, things will get better. Here in Europe, we get MiCA, which is basically one regulatory landscape for all countries in Europe, which will definitely be better. And some of the Asian countries are doing really well at the moment, still finding their ways well, but I mean, they're ahead of the game. And I think over time, if because all of this is in place to prevent money laundering, scams, terrorism, finance, etc. Countries will have to, and jurisdictions will have to work together. So everything will be kind of the same thing, implemented maybe in a slightly different way. But we already see that countries are exchanging data, working together, figuring out blockchain, that companies are specialized in transaction analysis on chain. And I think over time, we will get that clarity. But it's for now, it's still very hard to find the sweet spot between what's possible, what's allowed, what you should get a license for. So there's always the pressure to stay relevant, to be relevant, to build new stuff, to be innovative. At the same time, we have some time, because all of these things will take some time as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think governments are still themselves trying to understand the technology and how it all works. And look, there's disruption happening, and anytime there's disruption, there's change, and people don't like change naturally, right? So it's going to come over time, as you said, as folks get more educated about the technology in the industry. I want to get your thoughts on NFTs and the metaverse. I know we talked a bit about NFTs on the XRP ledger. Are you guys planning to do any type of support, maybe to some wallet with NFTs or anything like that? Is that something on the roadmap for 2023, 2024? And your thoughts on the metaverse as well?
Yeah, so the XRPL has a DevNet with NFT support enabled. And we fully support that in Xumm. So you can connect to that testnet in Xumm. And all the NFT related transaction types can be signed with Xumm. We're feature complete. We're also feature complete for all the amendments currently being voted on, being tested. So what we see today is that a lot of the NFT space development is integrating with Xumm, because we cater the lion's share of the ecosystem, the XRPL ecosystem. So for example, this sign-in feature I just mentioned, that's being used today by about 1,400 developers who are building their NFT related or non-NFT, but mostly NFT related at the moment, of course, because Ripple is handing out huge grants to spark something. These developers are building, and then when they interact with end users in a way where they have to sign something, for example, a mint transaction, or to put an offer on Ledger, or accept an offer, or to move an NFT, they're interacting through our platform with the end user, who can then sign locally non-custodial, send it to the XRPL, developer gets a call back, everybody happy. So we support that, we fully support that. What we will probably not do is add this native NFT viewer to Xumm. We're focusing on the transfer of value, payment, utility. I think NFTs have a place there, but not today. Today, I mean, concert tickets, maybe even land registries and everything, ownership of things, definitely very interesting use cases for NFTs. But we're not there yet. We're still experimenting. Sure. If you look at what's actually happening today, like 95% of what's happening with NFTs today is trading JPEGs. They are so we don't feel that use case. I mean, collectibles definitely, and if you look at baseball player cards, everything, digital versions of that, there are definitely use cases, and people love them, and businesses as well. And so that's not a bad thing. It's just not completely where we see this thing is going. So we don't want to allocate our development resources to build something natively in the app, especially when there's an entire ecosystem building those things, all with their own focus and their own vision. there are people building kick-ass viewers and marketplaces. There are other development teams building, for example, audio rights related NFT projects, and someone else is doing the concert ticket thing. So why should we try to build that in our application if we want to work with the ecosystem? So we already have the XApps feature where people can deploy their own web apps natively to Xumm and put it in the hands of all our users. And that's what we'll do for some time to come, where we will show users that they own X amount of NFTs, but then when you open that, we'll just show them basically an app store-like a listing of NFT-enabled XApps built by different developers in the ecosystem, marketplaces, and they can then use that to interact with those NFTs.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's so many people in specific niches with the NFT space and building things, but we're still very early. I'm very excited to see the real world applications beyond artwork, and if it's with documents, deeds for houses, or whatever it may be.
Exactly.
Yeah. Any thoughts on the metaverse, or you think that's still early as well? We're still version 1.0, still got to figure out things.
Yeah, so I have never been really, and maybe one day I'm gonna regret that, but I have never really been the VR metaverse gaming type. While everybody was playing video games when I was 12 or 14 years old, I was coding, and it never really had any attention, it was never my thing. So I look at it as yet another thing that is interesting, but people are still discovering in what direction that will go. It's not something we're actively doing anything with. If in any environment, so metaverse as well, there is a need for payments, value exchange, token exchange, NFT related stuff. You can do all of that today with our application and build XApps or integrations to meet up with end users, which is being done, right? There are game developers and even you can debate if that's metaverse, but people are building, for example, Minecraft stuff with in-app payments and land transfers integrated with Xumm and some other things as well. So yeah, that's for other builders in the ecosystem. Yeah. Let us provide the rails, the platform. Let us provide proper key management, security, allow users to trust that they will only sign what we show them, which doesn't mean the MetaMask experience where you sign a random hex string and then have to hope that everything will be fine. We show what you'll actually be signing and then allow developers to do what they do best and be creative.
For sure. The next question is probably a tough one, but it's not price prediction, but rather from an adoption standpoint. Where do you see the crypto market / industry in 5 years from an adoption standpoint?
There are a lot of things I actually don't dare to say when it comes to these questions. 5 years is a lot. I do believe that we'll see some of the crypto projects move under the hood, which is actually where some of the projects belong, where they help end users and businesses without anyone really noticing that there's crypto involved. That's something I really hope to see, because today a lot of things happening in this space are a solution looking for a problem. I think there are actually some of those problems, but they don't involve direct end user interaction with a crypto project or blockchain. So, I mean, even NFTs, let's say at some point we'll do concert tickets, deeds to houses, land registries, everything. The way most projects are looking at that today, and that includes us, that includes Xumm, is that they have a blockchain app, a crypto app, and then they try to morph this real life use case into that crypto environment. I think if we ever want to get real adoption, and I also think that that's where we're going, and that we need this creative phase to get there. It's people won't even know that they're using anything crypto or blockchain related. I think that's when we know that we actually we're actually solving problems for the masses, not for this group of early adopters.
Yeah, you're right. It's and a lot of the people in the world and consumers don't care, how the sausage. They don't care to know how the sausage is made, just that it's made and it's there, right? And they can get things done efficiently, fast.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's under the hood. A lot of these blockchains are going to be running and making the world more efficient, if you want to call it that. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. I got some wrap-up questions here for you. If you could create your own metaverse, and I know you said that's not your thing, but what would the theme be about? Would it be like a coding world where you're coding with other people in the metaverse or something?
I never gave this any thought. I have no idea. I don't think I would spend a second in any metaverse. There's so much to do here in real life.
I think your kids might.
Probably. They can teach me one day.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm the same way. Like, look, I've done VR, Facebook's Meta Quest and all that. Is it very appealing to me? No. Maybe when the technology and the quality gets better, and they can create, space in a metaverse and I can go explore and go to different galaxies. Yeah. But now, not so much.
So I think the closest experience to metaverse I had wasn't really metaverse, but there's this, I don't know, I don't remember the name. I think it's Meebo or something. It's a video call software, browser-based, web-based, where you're not calling like this, where we see each other and we hear each other, but you're all basically a walking television, a walking computer screen in this virtual world, and you can actually look at the other screens walking around. And if you get closer to each other, you can hear each other. So in this virtual world, if you have a meeting, for example, company meeting or whatever, you can all stand in a circle, you hear each other, you see each other, but you can also just separate yourself with a bunch of people and go stand in another corner of the virtual island. You just move around with your arrow keys, and then you only hear each other. And maybe far away, you hear some noise from the other group. So that's kind of a mix between a virtual world and what we're doing right now, where we're having a video call. And I was actually quite amazed with how easy it was to accept. Within 30 seconds, my brain completely accepted that I was there talking to people, and that at some point I was walking around to another group and have a conversation there. So that was surprisingly natural in a way. So I do see the appeal. I do see what it can do. Just not active in that space at all.
For sure. I'll have to check that out. Meebo, you said?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, I'll take a look at that. That sounds very interesting. And
yeah, MIBO.
MIBO. Okay, awesome. I'll check that out. I'll do it with some people at work and see how what it's like. Finally, I got some rapid fire questions here for you. Favorite food?
I'm a very, very, very uninteresting person when it comes to favorites. I don't really have favorites. It depends on when you ask me and in what environment you ask me. Favorite food? I like a good lasagna. I like Indonesian food if my mother-in-law cooks it, especially then. No, I like a lot of things. There isn't one thing.
Favorite musician or band?
That was an interesting one as well. It's quite broad. I have my moments where I like to listen to jazz, blues, like mostly blues, but also the easier stuff. We actually yesterday, my 3-year-old daughter asked me what my favorite musician was, and I said I really don't know. It can be classical, can be anything. And then she said, "Isn't it John Mayer?" Which he has some good songs, especially the blues influence there.
Oh
We
yeah.
used to play it a lot here with the kids. Crazy dances on was one of the first things she asked for when she was 2 years old. Uh, but
uh,
no, nothing specific.
well, John Mayer, I don't think he gets the credit as a guitar player that he should because of some of his pop songs, if you want to call it that. But
Yeah,
he's an amazing guitar player. Like I play guitar, so I watched some
same.
of his blues stuff. Yeah, it's just the pop radio songs don't get the credit, but you listen to some of his John Mayer and the trio band stuff and all that. It was
Yeah.
really um favorite movie.
Uh, Same problem again. I don't think I have one. I hardly watch movies as well, so and if I watch them, I don't remember much of them. So
All right, final one here. Favorite book, if you have one.
no, no, sorry. No, very boring. But no, read plenty. Don't really remember much of the details. I do if I reread it, but
Well, we'd say pleasure chatting with you. It's really amazing the work you guys are doing there at XRPL Labs, and I'm excited to see the new updates coming out this year. And of course, I you got to come back and talk to us once those updates are
will do.
live. But thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for being here, and anytime. Let me. I think somewhere next year would be an interesting time. We'll find an interesting time to have another conversation.
Sure.